What's up, YouTube? We're going to be on live. This is a massive topic. We're very excited. He's very excited to talk about this. He's been gagging, chomping at the bit for a while. 60 seconds, we'll be back. We're just going to let our little notifications go out. So you want to know how to beat chronic pain? Well, in today's video, series, we're going deep, man. We're going to go deep in the concept of pain science. This is a must watch for anybody who's ever injured themselves or anyone who suffers chronic or continuous pain. We're going to get stuck in right now. We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image. Seconds and I was like, all right, guys, if this is your first time rolling with the Unity Tribe and the Sound of Movement podcast, then allow me to introduce us. To my left, I've got Phil White, none other than AKA Dr. Phil. Behind the cam and doing all the mixer, I've got Richard, and outside I got Rad. And believe it or not, Rad is back today. He's not on the show today, but he is back today. He's out there. We've got a lot coming up. We've got a lot of really cool stuff coming on the show. And we're also doing a big reconstruct of the gym floor at the moment. So we're out there sort of designing some stuff. Very exciting, very exciting. Now, Phil's organised. He's got a slide deck and everything for this show. Yeah. This is big, and it's a big topic. So how are you feeling, first of all? You said you're a little bit sick today.
Yeah, classic. Like, you get a long weekend and then just get struck down by an illness. So, yeah. But it was good. Meant that I was changing my desk, getting things done, because I'm really excited about all the stuff we're launching here. And a lot of that was the podcast. So if you didn't know, we've got the podcast up and running. I think Rich is even putting the logo up now because we're high tech like that.
That's right.
Yes, if you go to soundofmovement.com, it will show you how to listen on any platform. So I work really hard to try and get those live up on the same day. So if you could subscribe.
It sounds really good. I'm going to throw it out there. I've listened to a few of the episodes on my way into work just to see what we sound like. And we're always leveling up and improving. And one of our big goals this year is to level up the video production of this project. And turn it into a bit more of a podcasting sort of environment, bit of Joe Rogan style with a table. We'll have across the table discussions. We're getting some awesome guests in, and we're going to separate it from the weekly workouts that we do out on the gym floor so that it's more user friendly to the podcast listeners. And the way we're going to make it exciting is just by getting some really cool people in to join the table. So very excited, and I'm very thankful and grateful for Phil for taking that on as a little side project for himself, as if, starting a new business and treating all of his patients and giving back to you guys, the community. He's like answering questions all day long. As if that wasn't enough work for him, he's decided to take on a big project, which is the podcast.
Yeah, and I'm excited to get my own podcast up and running, so this is a bit of like a test project.
There's a seriously ulterior agenda and motive here. He's just practicing and rehearsing so that he gets his big one going. But look who's back. Woo!
The man.
The Rad Star.
Hey, everyone.
He's actually doing some work today, which is quite amazing. No, that's not true. He's been doing a lot of work behind the scenes, especially for our online tribe, and that's something else that we're really, really working hard behind the scenes to make better. So anyway, look, let's dive into the topic of today's discussion. Now, really, I'm going to be Phil's co-host today because this is the topic that he is an absolute expert in, and I am a bit of a passenger. But I have one really, really important and quite valuable insight, which is that I have experienced a lot of pain in my life.
Yeah, well, that's helpful because I think what we're going to be talking about today is, just it's so relevant to bring it back to your own personal experiences, and I'll be, talking about some of my personal experiences that made this sort of stuff really click home for me. On the point of me being an expert about this stuff, like I see myself as definitely a lifelong learner, and I'm trying to, figure it out the best I can, but there are so many people out there, and I'll link you to some videos of some people who live and breathe this stuff who really have some neat little videos if you're interested more. But yeah, we'll be, depending on how interested people are in this topic, we can
is the slide deck proprietary? It is, isn't it, Macquarie University? We can't make it available to people.
Yeah, but it's a pretty simple, just 6 core concepts that I want to go to today, which might challenge your ideas of what is causing your pain.
So just to reiterate, I can't give you the slide deck, so don't ask for it because it's supplied by the university, and I'd probably be in breach of some sort of proprietary information.
Maybe, but also write it down. It's pretty simple. It's pretty simple.
That's right. Yeah. Hello, Quack. Hello, Jarakichi from New Zealand, and I think Quack is up in Queensland. Is that right? Australia?
I think so,
yeah. Quack, tell us where you're from, where you are. And we have...
Jarakichi saying, welcome back, Rad.
Welcome back, Rad. WB, that took me a little while to get. And we have Bioxide, who is... Kumaran, yeah. And I actually spoke to Kumaran on Facebook the other day and promised him that I'd never forget who Bioxide was. And I just did.
Aliases.
I was up really late working last night, guys. So please excuse any failed attempt to remember people's names today. My brain is still waking up.
Yeah. All right. Should we get into it?
Let's get into it.
I think to start off with, I just really want to talk about the massive problem that is pain and especially chronic pain, because I was looking I was going back over some of the lectures we had from uni and a few of the talks, and it was talking about the burden on the healthcare system. And so in America, the amount of money that goes into pain is more than cancer, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes combined.
Yeah.
So they're the biggest diseases that are an absolute epidemic on the whole nation of America and all the countries around the world. They're the big ones. Yeah. And then pain just trumps all three of them combined. So it was $600 billion a year goes into chronic pain management in the US. And then the thing, that's what sure, that's a lot of money. But then you think about how poor the outcomes are.
Yeah.
They've got this fucking epidemic. Sorry about the swearing, but I get really worked up about this sort of stuff. Yeah. But you have a chronic pain epidemic where people are on, get addicted to opioids, and then so many people's lives are falling apart because of these, addictive medications. And so you think they've put $600 million into this, and then they've got arguably
$600 billion.
$600 billion with a B.
It's an extra zero.
Yeah, and then they've got a terrible outcome from it, and it's just such a massive problem. And the only way that people are going to get out of this huge issue is if people understand pain better and can take control themselves, and part of that is going to be the medical community getting up to date with the latest pain science, because there's...
So who's at fault? I mean, I know I don't want to point the finger, but who's at fault here? Is it doctors just overprescribing pain medication, or is it...
Yeah, when you think about fault, I definitely am apprehensive to put the fault on doctors, because people are working from what they know, and I think people have people in healthcare generally have patients' best interests at heart, and I really believe that. But there are very outdated ideas of pain that have influenced what maybe doctors think are the best ways to deal with pain. And then there is big money involved in the pharmaceutical world, and so if you can get people using your pills over and over again, then you're gonna make a lot of money. So it's a bit cynical, but I think that the pharmaceutical industry
it's a reality. They start with the best intentions, but then when money becomes involved, it does become a bit of a race. A race to make more of it. And I do believe that pharmaceutical cops a lot of flack, and their intentions are generally good, but as I said, once money becomes involved, the best intentions can be washed away very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's as a doctor, it's probably quite appealing to have someone come in and do a little like presentation and pay for your lunch and, you know, take you to nice sort of conventions, and people who are selling you pills can do that. But, you know, people who are encouraging exercise, healthy living, like adequate sleep, all these things that really do help pain long term, you know, they don't have the budget to do that.
They don't have the budget. So we're getting flogged, people. We're losing the battle. But you can help by tuning in today and smashing the like button, because if you smash the like button, we're going to go deeper in this conversation.
Yeah.
If you don't smash the like button and we don't get a bit of engagement, then you know, we may just brush over it and move on to the next topic. So make sure that
and if there's something that you kind of can like feel happens with yourself. So if you have pain, or even if like, especially if you know someone who really struggles with chronic pain and maybe is pretty reliant on medications, share this video and share the podcast with them and help them understand you know, ways in which they can move on from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my mic here because apparently Phil sounds better than me, and we cannot have that.
Yeah, well, I told you I looked it up.
Cannot have that. Yeah.
All right.
Beautiful.
So, I guess to start out with, I'm just going to go through the 6 core concepts of pain, which this high-tech different camera angles is I'm learning. You know, I haven't had the
he hasn't had the
privilege of
my
own camera.
Your own camera. Look.
So now, Yani, you can pick your nose, hang out. Do whatever you
that's
want.
right.
Yeah.
I'm still here, folks.
So the 6 core concepts of pain. These are basically was like the foundation in our first week when we went to uni. They're really trying to make this the lens in which you see every other part of your physiotherapy journey is understanding the pain from the get-go. So number one,
this is fairly new, isn't it now?
Yeah,
it's very new. It's even new to be getting taught this at university.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this is going to be the thing that really starts to shift that culture around what doctors and health professionals are prescribing for pain. So with the 6 core concepts of pain, the first one is that pain is always an output of the brain, 100% of the time.
Yeah.
And so that might be a bit sort of strange for people to think about, that, you know, when you think about pain, it's like such a somatic experience, like your body, you feel the pain, like where...
Yeah, very specific to where you think the injury is.
Yes.
This is and I'm just going to elaborate from someone who doesn't come across as scientific. This was a big breakthrough for me in my understanding of pain when Phil explained this to me, because I used to say, you know, you've got pain receptors in your tissue that feed information back to the central nervous system and the brain, and that's incorrect. It's not right. Yeah. And I don't know where I formed that notion, and I think there is a notion generally that that's what's occurring.
100%. That's like the old school, you know, thinking was that, you know, you activate your pain receptors, and then, you know, the more you activate them, the more pain you feel.
Yeah,
and I think that's
right.
Like, it makes a lot of sense to think about it like that way, because, you know, it's
obvious.
It just seems very logical, but with the body, you know, there's kind of really interesting things at play here. And so to go a bit further into that,
so just very quickly. So if I pinch myself here and I go to a level where I experience pain more than discomfort, what's actually happening? My brain is going, okay, that's not cool.
Yeah.
And making me feel a certain way.
Yeah. So what happens is you have a whole bunch of different receptors. So instead of thinking about having pain receptors, think about you just have lots and lots of information. So you've got really, really fast fibers. So with your nerves, you have some that send signals really quickly. You have some signals that are not so quick. So the really quick ones you want are related to proprioception. So how we can stay balanced and we can know where our limbs are in space and if we're going to run into things or, you know, walk off a cliff. So proprioception is probably something a word that people understand, but that's the idea where you understand where your limbs are in space. So it's really important that if you have something that touches your skin, that signal gets to your brain really quickly so you can then act on that signal. So the first thing you're getting is just that there is a non-noxious, so like a stimulus that is touching me, and then your brain will, you know, deal with that. The next sort of things, you also have receptors that are related to pressure and temperature. And then the thing that people get confused with pain receptors is your nociceptors. Yep. So nociceptors, they are the things that basically can sense damage in that area. Yep. So when they sense that damage, then they have a fairly they have a slightly, there's two different types of, I won't get too deep into it. Basically, it sends brain information up to your brain being like, hey, something has happened here.
Yeah, there's damage occurring.
Yeah, exactly. So just to be really clear there, they're not saying, hey, this hurts. they're saying there is damage.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have these peripheral nerves. So with you pinching your hand here, they're going to have whatever nerves that are dealing with this particular part are going to be connected to your spinal cord. So that nerve signal will run up through your arm, up to your neck. So around, your neck region, it'll enter the spinal cord.
Yep.
So then at your spinal cord area, you have basically your spinal cord then modulates that signal. So depending on your kind of physiological state, so whether or not you are, have like a lot of adrenaline around, if you're in sort of fight or flight mode, you might sort of downplay that, being like, hey, it doesn't matter, I'm getting pinched here, I'm running away from a lion. Yeah. So at the spinal cord level, that signal may get just turned way down. So that's why you can, if you're all excited and you're, in that sort of really heightened state and you're sprinting through a bush and you're getting like sticks whack you in the face you don't even realize, or something like that, that kind of idea, because your spinal cord level, you're in that really heightened state. So things are just being like, okay, we're turning everything down here just so that we can get on with what we're trying to do.
A good example, I think, is like if you've ever watched Tour de France, I'm quite fascinated with Tour de France because it's just such an elite level of sport. And you'll see guys take like a really serious fall and break a collarbone, and they'll get up and keep riding if the bike is okay, and they got so much adrenaline going because of the accident and because of the race, and they're in this like intense focus mode. And then you see them finish a leg. They might ride like kilometers and kilometers, miles and miles and miles, and then at the end they collapse and experience the pain, and can't move, and they have to get rushed to hospital because they've snapped their collarbone and whatever else.
And so just to be really precise here, what I'm talking about is the physiological presence of this like adrenaline, so this chemical change in your body. That's what's happening at the spinal cord level. Yep. So then so other things that can influence that is inflammation and all sorts of other stuff. But just to kind of go on that same example you've got, so that when they've had the crash in the Tour de France, they probably got like that chemical change in their body with the adrenaline. Yep. But then you have the signal that's been modulated at the spinal cord level. It goes up through your spine and gets into your brain. And so within the brain, you then have your thoughts, moods, beliefs, context. All of those factors then influence how much sort of descending, so from the top down, like your brain is now modulating how much pain you're experiencing. So for people in that example of the Tour de France, like they have their context is that they're thinking about, hey, this is a race that I've dreamed about being in my whole life. Like I've trained, I've put so much into this. So all of that sort of context, and then their emotions around it, they're probably pretty emotionally charged by the experience, and basically all of those things will have a modulatory effect on that pain experience. Whereas if to kind of flip it and to be in someone who's maybe in a more sensitized state, who if they have a noxious stimulus or a heat stimulus or something like that, and they're in a sensitized state, maybe they haven't had much sleep, maybe they've kind of got chronic inflammation from having a fairly poor diet, then if you do that pinching thing, and you might have experienced this if you've had the flu, where you put on clothes and even just like the pressure of like the clothing on you, like so that kind of level of sensitization, it goes up through your those same signals, they get to your spinal cord level, and then
they get amplified,
and then you go up into your brain, where you're maybe feeling a bit sorry for yourself. You're maybe in this feeling like, oh, I can't be, like, I really want to be doing the things, like I have a lot to get done, I'm really stressed now, I'm not going to be able to go to work, so maybe I won't get paid. All of these things have now just turned up your experience and amplified your pain even more. So it gets to that point where things that really wouldn't otherwise be painful are suddenly excruciating. So there's a few different terms for that. So there's hyperalgesia, which is basically if you have a noxious stimulus, so something that is actually causing damage. If you feel a increase in pain from a noxious stimulus, so like if you were to pinch yourself and like regularly that would kind of hurt, but if you did it and it really hurt, then that's kind of hyperalgesia, which people might have experienced before. But then allodynia is what I was talking about with the t-shirt example of when you have the flu and you're just like, everything hurts. Even things that would otherwise definitely, you don't notice your t-shirt a lot of the time, because all of those signals of contact and pressure that are the fabric on your skin, they get to your spinal cord and they don't even get past there because they just get turned right down. So at this time, all those signals are always happening and they're just getting turned up to 11. And so now you've got what's called allodynia, where a non-noxious stimulus, so something like that t-shirt, is now actually causing a pain experience.
That's
cool,
really interesting. Yeah, very, very cool. I mean, cool and also really crap at the same time.
No, I think it's amazing, because just imagine if you always felt the same amount of pain from like the same stimulus, and you were trying to escape from a lion chasing you, and you stubbed your toe.
Yeah,
like,
right.
If you stubbed your toe and then you were just like lying on the floor, like
the other really cool thing about this, which has me really fascinated, is that there's a lot of research going on, even at the moment, and for the last couple of decades, on pain management, because there are certain situations where, and the one that comes to mind that I can think of is in a limb amputee situation from a trauma or a traumatic experience. They have a lot of this with war veterans who have lost a limb or been in quite a traumatic injury. They have this phantom pain that goes on, and no amount of pain pills or drugs or anything else will do anything for it. They don't have the limb anymore, but they still feel the injury. They feel the limb.
Do you know what the way in which they fix that pain now?
Through
a mirror.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. Through literally mindset, emotion, looking at it, and
even more than the mindset and the emotion is you just trick the brain.
Yeah.
Like that's what's so fascinating about this. There's not like where you've had the amputation, your nerve signal, like your nerve fibers will have some changes there where they just start sending some kind of random signaling, and then that all gets kind of processed by the spinal cord in the brain, as with every other thing we talked about before. But yeah, now if you have an amputated hand, there's some really great videos of this mirror box therapy is what it's called, where basically you put your hand in a box that if my right arm's amputated, probably do the left one because you wouldn't want to see a watch on both arms. So if I had my left arm amputated and then I put my hand here and there's a mirror just there, so if I'm looking down, I see as if I've got two hands instead of the one. And then often the phantom limb pain will feel like a real cramping, like an inability to let go. That's one of the really horrible ones where it's sometimes not even pain, but just like every time you think about it, your fist clenches harder and harder and harder and harder, and you can never let it go. And so basically all they do is just have that kind of reflection of the hand, which makes it look like they've got a left hand. Give it a bit of wiggle, goes away.
And it goes away.
Like just amazing how, and a really good example of how you can show, like you can trick your brain, and that will totally change your experience of the pain.
Yeah. Now, anyone who's interested in that, I read a fantastic book last year or the year before by a guy called Norman Doidge, who wrote a book called The Brain's Way of Healing. And he goes really deep into that. And
is that the brain that heals itself?
The brain, no. The Brain That Changes is his first book.
Okay.
His second book was specific to pain science.
Yep.
And he went and spent a whole bunch of time in a few of the universities and clinics over in America where they're training these amputees and teaching them how to overcome pain, to switch off pain through a form of meditation, essentially, and he talked about that exact exercise as well at length.
And there's some other really good ones where you can trick yourself into thinking that a plastic dummy of a hand is your own hand, using a similar sort of techniques. And there's some pretty funny videos you can watch on YouTube of people getting convinced that their plastic hand is their own hand, and then they can actually feel what's happening to this plastic hand, and then they smash it with a hammer, and the people freak out. So there's some really good videos of that. And there's also another interesting one of people basically wearing one person wearing a VR headset, and then another person wearing kind of like a Google Glasses, which is recording the field of view of the other person. So they're standing next to each other. So as if we were looking at each other, I was wearing the VR headset, and then you were wearing the goggles. And then they get them to shake hands. And so what I'm seeing is me. So you're wearing the goggles, and I'm wearing the VR headset. So I'm seeing myself shake my own hand, but then they basically like produce a pain stimulus on one person, the person whose field of vision it is, and then basically it just gets them totally mixed up where the person who has the VR headset says, yes, it hurts there on the other person, even though they're feeling it on themselves. Just some zany crazy kind of stuff to show that.
So what we're really, what we're really trying to reinforce here is that the vast majority of it, all of it, is coming from the brain.
100%.
And just as a brain can signal that you're in pain, it can be switched off as well.
Or turned down.
That's right. And that's really important. Kwok, thank you for letting us know that you're in Brisbane. Now, guys, I'd love to know, before we go further, is anyone experiencing ongoing pain? And what's your experience of it, and what are you doing to manage it? Are you medicating, or are you interested in learning about ways that you can sort of tone it down, turn it down, or even overcome it just through totally different strategies than medication.
Yeah. So we'll move on to the number 2 of the 6 core concepts of pain, which is pain does not equal the amount of tissue damage, which is something I've sort of covered here. But I think it can kind of, a useful couple of anecdotes that can help kind of understand that is the classic story of there's this guy who was in a construction site and he was walking around. He had, this is kind of back in the day, I don't think they had sort of as steel reinforced work boots then, and basically he stepped on a nail and the nail went through the bottom of his shoe and straight up and was poking out the top of his shoe. And so understandably absolutely screaming in pain, gets taken off to hospital, like they need to like delicately move him, and he's just in absolute agony. Get to the hospital, they've got like, they're trying to cut the shoe off, and any amount of, if they even bump the nail or move the foot too much, he just is screaming out in agony. And so they painstakingly cut the shoe off, and then they realise that the nail has gone directly in between his toes and hasn't actually pierced through, hasn't pierced his foot.
You poor bugger.
And as soon as he sees that, then suddenly all of the embarrassment totally overrides any amount of pain he was feeling. Basically. It was all of the context. It was the emotions around seeing yourself, in this sort of situation. He's, at work. He's probably stressed. So all of these things would have just. So you would have had the feeling of like the sensation of touch of the nail touching up against the skin in between his toes.
Yeah.
But that's got to the spinal cord level. It's been turned up, and then it's got to the brain, and it's got turned up until it's.
Look, I had this experience only a few years ago when I came off my mountain bike and sort of almost degloved my foot. I hit the chain cog and caused quite a severe trauma cut, gash to my shin, and I severed the anterior tibialis tendon, which is the tendon that runs down the front of your shin, completely. It was holding on by a few threads, but it didn't function anymore. And I didn't feel any pain at all. It just felt like a shinny, when you kick the pedal on your mountain bike. And I went to take a step to pick my bike up, and my foot gave out and I fell over, and then it wasn't until I looked down and saw this gaping gash in the front of my shin and all of the tissues and the nerves and everything exposed did I go, oh wow, that's quite painful. Like I honestly didn't feel a thing.
Yeah.
And other than the concept of a shinny, which we've all done many a time on a BMX bike.
And that's exactly right, because you've got the context of like when you're mountain biking, you've kind of got this like heightened sort of fight or flight state. You've got the kind of context of like, hey, this is kind of a fun but a bit dangerous sort of thing. Yeah. And then when you actually get the, hit your shin against the pedal, it's like, oh, I've done this before. Your body has been in this context before. Your brain's like, hey, this is cool. We've had this before. It hurt really badly, but then we moved on and we were totally fine. Don't worry about your shin's fine. So that's like the subconscious thing that your brain's telling yourself. And so your level of danger, because if we think about pain as perceived threat, so your perceived threat is the experience of your pain. And so your brain's like, hey, all good. And that signal is getting kind of turned down. But then when you look at your leg and you see hey, whoa.
Like the biggest gash that I've ever had to my body,
you can
and opened up so you can see everything. You asked Rad, he disliked it. I was like, tell me how bad it is. And he's like, man, I don't want to look at that. That's gross.
Yeah. So now your perceived threat is rightfully so, has just gone through the roof. And now your pain will have that kind of context and that sort of amplification around it.
That's right. And apparently in the book, The Brain's Way of Healing, Norman Deutsch points out that you've got like scales of pain from 1 to 10, and the way they describe it is 10 is like getting, imagine getting dropped into a boiling vial of hot oil. That would be like just send it off the Richter scale. Apparently, when you hit a pain level of 10 on the pain meter, it shuts off. And your brain shuts off because it's too much for the body to comprehend and cope with. And that's what sort of triggered them to want to go down this path of, okay, well, if the brain can shut it off at that level, why can't we shut it off at a 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5?
Yeah, right.
We should be able to train the brain to do that, And so, that's apparently what initiated the extensive research that they're doing now. I can't remember the clinics and universities, but you can get that book and look it up, or you can Google it. Yeah, it's really interesting. Let's go to number 3.
Just on that second point, I just want to have a really clear example, which is just so common and I see in the clinic all the time, for the pain does not equal the amount of tissue damage, is when you think about knee osteoarthritis.
Yep.
So there's some really kind of cool studies showing where they X-ray like a whole population of people over the age of 60, and basically they, like on those x-rays you can see some people who have like definite joint narrowing where they've had a lot of the cartilage is no longer sort of looking pretty like it did back in, when the person was younger. And then you'll have some people who are like, there's basically that kind of bone on bone thing that people love to talk about. And then other people who have, what would otherwise look like a pretty normal joint space with a normal amount of cartilage. And then they like get the pain scales from each of these people. And it's really interesting that there is no correlation between the amount of like the conventional damage you'd see and the amount of pain they're experiencing. So
I found that really fascinating, and I think you can tie it into the same topic, is that I think it was last year or a few years ago, they did a study on Olympic athletes who had qualified for the Olympics to see what sort of spinal damage they had. And they found that it was the vast majority of Olympic level athletes had quite what would be considered quite severe degenerative damage to their spines, disc bulges, all sorts of different stuff. And stuff that a lot of people would go to a physio therapist or a chiropractor complaining about, and none of these athletes had experienced any discomfort whatsoever in the spine. And we all have this huge freak out about like, oh, you've been diagnosed with a disc bulge, it's like life over. But these athletes, like all of them, I think it was like a whopping amount, like 67% of them had some form of a severe disc bulge.
It's the same with like patellar tendinopathy. Like basically, if an athlete doesn't have it, it's a sign that they're not an athlete. Like basically, like right. That is your body's way of like adapting to this force over time. And if you are still able to maintain, your activity, then it's just that's the body is adapted to do that, and there's like no issue. It's kind of like people are thinking about it more like you have wrinkles because you've been out in the sun a bit. Your body has just adapted with it, and sure, like it doesn't look as pretty, but like it's. If you're not experiencing issues from it, then it's not a problem. So, really interesting. With the, I think, people can probably appreciate that, with someone who's got arthritis, they've often got a whole lot of other stuff going on. So they've usually got arthritis because they've been inactive for a long period of time. With that, it's quite common in people who are generally a bit heavier, and so they've probably got like a less than ideal nutritional situation going on.
This is what I was going to ask. Is there any correlation? Because I read recently, doing research for my book that I'm writing on nutrition at the moment, that there are some nutrition scientists and scientists doing studies on the correlation between like leaky gut or nutritional health.
So I remember when I was talking about all the things in the spinal cord. So when we talk about the spinal cord modulation, it's basically comes down to the kind of physiological condition of the person. And so when we think about those sort of nutritional conditions, is often that kind of results in a level of chronic inflammation. And so that chronic inflammation is when is one of the factors that can really increase, like amplify things at that spinal cord level. So certainly, it's something that's definitely involved. We might just pause here and see what Bikeseed's got to say. So Kumran, I can't read from that far away.
Okay, so he said, speaking of fun pain experiences, one of the worst pain I felt was a cricket ball into the fingers. I literally couldn't see properly from the pain, but my fingers were fine afterwards being just minutes later. I can certainly relate. I've broken so many of my fingers, Kumaran, and that a lot of it came from my boxing days. One of the worst came from getting a basketball on the end of my finger playing basketball, which is a pretty common injury to get when you're not looking. You see the pass coming and you go to look at your next move and you just don't misjudge where the ball's going into your hand and it cocks you on the end of the finger. I don't know if I've ever spoken to a basketball player who hasn't had that happen at least once, but it really damaged my finger and it never recovered from it. But yeah, I don't know. Is there like more nerve happening in the fingers or something?
So I think if people are watching and sitting at a computer, have a look at, go into Google Images, don't turn us off, but go into Google Images and search homunculus. And so if you look at the homunculus, basically it's a representation of a human, but giving changing the size of the parts of the body to represent how much nerve innervation you have at that area. And so if you look at it, the two things that really stand out is that they have enormous hands. Like basically your hands are just like, would look like they're about 40% of your body weight. And then your lips are really big, and then everything else is kind of like shrunken away, really.
Yeah,
and so,
right.
your hands have the just so much more innovation because you've got to be able to discriminate against things that you're interacting with, and so much of what we interact with is either from our hands or with our mouth. So when you're ingesting things, you want to know if it's going to be something that's likely to cause you,
kill you.
Yeah, if it's really hot or if it's spiky or all these things that could do internal damage. And also we want taste to kind of give us information about that food as well.
Yep.
But with our hands, we've got to be able to, manipulate objects in front of us, have these fine motor skills. It's what's allowed humans to, be so effective with tools and advanced our sort of, our species over time. So our hands are just incredibly well sensitized. And one thing that the 2-point discrimination is a little test you can do where basically you get 2 little pinpricks and you see how close together you can discriminate 2 distinct pinpricks. So you do that on your hand if you're not looking at it, and you're going to say like, okay, I can feel it basically within a centimeter. But then if you were to get someone to do that same thing on your back, for example, and then they have like 2 points of contact, it's basically once it gets within about 5 centimeters, you can't tell like that there's 2 there. It just feels like 1 because your body isn't going to innovate your whole body like that. Because then can you imagine if you're sitting up against a remotely kind of spiky like rock or chair, it would just be
intense.
Like intense because you'd be feeling absolutely everything. So the body's and the brain has really developed a clever way of basically sending, like being able to get information from places where it's useful to get information from, and for those other areas
discriminate places that aren't.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so that's just
fantastic. Well, there you go.
Whenever something happens to your hands, or if you get punched in the face, like you'll feel it if it hits you in the lips. Like anything around your mouth, you burn your foot.
Possibly one of the most painful things that I've ever experienced is smashing my thumb with a hammer so badly that I split the bone, and I was breaking blocks. I was breaking blocks working as a bricklayer, and you have to hit them with a sharp object that splits the brick, and you're hitting it with a mallet hammer. And I just stupidly wasn't concentrating and had my thumb on top and hit it at full force. And it was horrendous.
So maybe if you're watching live or you're watching after the fact, maybe just put in the comments the thing that has caused you the most physical pain ever, and then have a look through the list, and we'll press like on the worst sounding one to get a tally of like.
I wonder if anyone's going to say my ex-boyfriend or girlfriend.
Yeah, that's why I did say physical pain. So we'll do chuck it down there. It'll be interesting to do it, and then we can maybe talk about some of those experiences. If people do want to hear more about this over the coming week,
absolutely,
we can talk about some of those examples of how your brain's probably dealing with those pain experiences. So we'll keep moving.
10 minutes more on this show. So where are we? We're on number 3.
Through 2.
That's all right.
But
we'll keep going.
With number 3, like a lot of these we've talked about already in these examples. So number 3 is that pain is influenced by multiple factors such as thoughts, activities, sleep, mood, and stress. So it's exactly as I've talked about before.
That's deep. Let that resonate for a little bit, folks.
So again, thinking about taking that Panadol tablet, when you're taking that Panadol tablet, it doesn't change any of your thoughts, activities, sleep, mood, or stress. It may change your thoughts slightly, which is why the placebo is so powerful, is that you've taken something that your doctor or the culture has said is something that's really helpful to get rid of this pain. So maybe your thoughts are really amplifying the effect of that paracetamol you're taking, or the anti-inflammatories or whatever you're taking, and that's why a sugar pill could probably be about as effective a lot of the time as paracetamol, because the thoughts around what you're doing for yourself is so powerful.
And you can probably correct me here if I'm wrong, but when a pharmaceutical company is releasing a new drug or a new medication, they generally have to go up against placebo to prove that it's to get it approved by the medical board. And as far as I know, they only have to beat placebo by 30%. Is that right? It's very. They talk about that also in Norman Doidge's book, and they go through the statistics, and it's ridiculously like if it just outperforms placebo by a little bit, then it's like, okay, approved. That's good enough.
That's not to say that those drugs aren't working well. It's to say that placebo is bloody good.
Placebo is really good. That's exactly right. You guys got to understand that this is what I think the macro and what I hope to get across in this whole series on pain science is that you have a lot of control over this stuff.
100%.
A lot of control over it. And we talk about the concept of an injury identity as being one of the fundamental reasons why a lot of people don't ever overcome an injury. This is why. This is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now we're going deep as to why. Okay, I'll let you go.
And so just on that placebo, I think it's a huge topic and we could talk a whole lot about it. But one really interesting thing to think about is that often people who are not engaging in their in activities and sports or whatever will say like, oh, I probably just need surgery. Like I've got so much wear and tear, it's bone on bone, I need surgery. But then now they've gone and done placebo surgeries where they look at knee arthroscopy, so basically going in and cleaning up that
knee that you're complaining about.
Yeah, exactly, and making it look neat and tidy and like getting rid of some of that damage and whatever. And basically they've done placebo surgeries where they the surgeon will do everything else will happen normally. They'll have the anaesthetist come in. They think they're getting the surgery. They've ticked off that they're part of the study, so it's not just a.
Yeah.
But basically, the surgeon will make the incisions exactly as they would usually, and then they'll get a random number generator or a card or whatever, which will randomly allocate whether or not they actually perform the surgery. And so they've opened everything up, and then the surgeon finds out whether or not they're doing the surgery. And if they're not doing the surgery, they stitch things up, send the person back out, treat them exactly as they would any other patient. So the
rehab and everything's the same.
Yeah, they'd have no idea, and basically there's no difference with that.
Yeah, you can't tell the difference between people who have had the surgery and people who haven't had the surgery.
Yeah.
So placebo is not just a mental thing; it affects your physical body as well.
Yeah, and pain and exactly the same thing. Like pain does not equal the amount of tissue damage. So if they've changed the damage in the tissues, but there's been no change there.
Yeah, and just to give you an example, there's cases of people in that study who were professional English Premier League players who had needed to get that surgery done and went out and played their just as good as they've ever played before, thinking that they had the surgery. So it's not just everyday people who just need to walk around. It's people that have to perform at the highest level.
So number 4, acute pain serves as a useful protective function to warn danger or injury. 100%. We're not saying that you want to get rid of all pain all the time, and as we've talked about, that pain is giving you information, and it should be related to your sort of perceived threat of the situation. So if you've just torn up most of the front of the front of your shin, then it's a good amount of pain to say hey,
don't do that again.
Maybe don't get on your bike and keep going.
That's
you should
exactly right.
absolutely stop now.
Yeah. And on that, I talk to my son and my kids about this all the time when they hurt themselves. Pain serves a very, very important purpose, and they've even done sort of research on certain people are born without the mechanism to experience pain.
They don't last long.
The majority of them die before they're 5 years old. So it's it really, really is something that our body and brain relies on to keep us safe and to prevent us from exposing ourselves to physical harm and potentially dangerous situations.
Yeah, so next time you are in pain, just think about it as hey, thanks, body. It's good information.
Doing your job. Yeah, that's exactly right.
If it's in that acute kind of situation where the stimulus, the pain experience, sort of matches the stimulus that you're experiencing.
And if it's not, and it's just ongoing, then you may need to sort of go through some.
So that's the next point, which is that chronic pain results from a hypersensitive nervous system and usually no longer warns of damage. So I've talked a bit about sort of tissue healing times before with your muscles usually sort of depending on the severity, sort of after 6 weeks, you should be your muscles kind of mostly healed, and then up to 3 months for muscle stuff is usually pretty good, and for bones, tendons, ligaments, within 6 months, hey, the tissue has healed itself. So when you still are getting pain from those, if you've had an acute injury, you've twisted your ankle or hurt your knee or whatever.
Just quickly explain the difference between acute injury and what's the other one? Chronic injury.
Yeah, so that's what I'm trying to get into here. Where basically if you've had an acute injury where you've done a traumatic thing that has hurt that structure, or it could be an overuse thing, can still be related to an acute phase. Yeah. So basically, you've identified that there's something going on there.
There's a mechanism that's
caused that injury. You've spent sort of 3 months for simple muscular sort of stuff, maybe up to 6 months for
bone or connective tissue.
Yeah, exactly. Bones are amazing at healing and often better to injure than your muscles as well, and especially ligaments, because they heal stronger than when they were originally injured. But I digress. But after, I'm sure that
4 minutes.
plenty of people have experienced that you've had something that you maybe injured, 6+ months ago, and you're still experiencing pain from that. You've got to understand that the pain is now no longer giving you that useful information that the acute sort of phase initially did, warning of danger injury. You don't have that danger, you don't have that injury anymore. And now it's this sort of hypersensitive nervous system that is, it's hypersensitive because you've got these sort of physiological changes that impact the spinal cord level, as I talked about, or maybe you've now got these thoughts, moods, and beliefs that have been negatively affected by your injury, where maybe you stopped going to the gym, maybe you stopped, running, which you used to love, which made you feel, good and happy and healthy, which has then impacted, maybe you put on a bit of weight, maybe you've gone down that kind of classic spiral of then you start not eating as well. So all of these sort of factors from the initial injury, which aren't related to acute danger or injury, all of these factors are now impacting your nervous system to amplify any sort of feeling that you get from that area. So a kind of classic one is with people get really sensitive sort of scars, and basically you've got to try and desensitize those scars because people have these, like you get so sensitive about something that any signal from there is just like unbearable.
Just crazy, I actually experienced that with my
and
with
that's
my
why people
shin.
that's why people get doing scar massage, and
that's what
you've
Mick,
got to
you know Mick McCleary, the massage service. So he came in and worked on it with his little tool.
He's a demon.
And honestly, like, it was the most horrendously uncomfortable thing that I experienced, but it completely fixed it. It completely fixed the pain that I was experiencing there.
Yeah. So just to be kind of wrap that up, so once you've kind of had in that chronic pain state where you, all of those factors that we've talked about already before are now amplifying any signal you get from there, and then it feels like you've still got this injury, but it's like when you think about how tissue healing works, there's, everything sort of should be okay and working there. And you've got to remember that with any part of your body, you've got capacity, so basically how much load you can handle. And if you've been injured and then you've spent loads of time not training, not being on your feet, not using that body part, your capacity is suddenly decreased massively. So if you try and just put the same load that you used to while you now have this lower capacity, basically you're not going to be as strong. And so then you have those kind of signals being coming up from your body that you're then hypersensitive about, that then become pain. So I guess that's a little bit complicated, but basically chronic pain issues really come from this whole raft of things that we've been talking about.
And they can be dealt with through the right sort of programming.
Which is number 6. Well done, Yani. Is many treatments can help turn down a hypersensitive nervous system, reduce pain, and improve quality of life.
Yeah, and that's super important to understand, guys, because that ties in with what we're talking about here on a macro level, overcoming that injury identity and being really proactive about the way that you do it. Sort of relinquishing your need or reliance of medication and pain pills, and having a proactive approach to overcoming and managing your pain. I wouldn't even say managing your pain. I think it's more overcoming your pain.
Yeah,
and
letting go of it.
Letting go of it. Perfect. Exactly. You know, and you need. My final thought, because we're going to bring this in for a landing, we're continuing this discussion tomorrow and throughout this week because there's a lot that we can talk about, and I'm sure we're going to get some good questions in. But my final thought is that if you're not working with an up-to-date therapist, physiotherapist like Phil, who's aware of this sort of stuff and is using this as a central focus point for the management and the rehabilitation of injury, then you probably need to be asking these questions, because you can't, no amount of massage and no amount of manipulation and no amount of this and that is going to fix a chronic injury that's now a wiring issue in the brain.
And can often sort of like amplify things in when you think about your thoughts, moods, and beliefs. Like so many people are like, I just go into the chiro for a tune-up, or I see the massage therapist or physio for, I just need a bit of ongoing sort of maintenance work, which kind of is that idea that that you're relying on someone else and it's something outside of your control. Locus of control is such an important thing to understand, that if you then you get to that sort of 3-month mark and you're like, oh, I'm due for my tune-up, then suddenly you've got this sort of part of your brain that's like, there's something not right with me, I need to get it fixed, when really, and that's going to amplify and increase any sort of stimulus that you're getting.
Yeah.
So
now, look, I'll just say on that note, I am a glutton for therapy. I love it, and I call it spinal masturbation. I go to, I have a good friend who's an amazing chiropractor, and I genuinely love the feeling of going to a chiro and coming out and feeling really great. And I have a massage with Phil every week, and I get him to even adjust my spine. Just thoracic spine, yeah. And I even get, like, I have my girlfriend who's like 40 kilos, my fiance Kalisha, walk on my back all the time, and I love it. I think it feels amazing, and so I'm not. We don't want to.
But
you know,
I guess
say
if you
anything.
exactly, like it's just to understand like when. Your mindset around it. So basically,
Yeah,
like
that's exactly
your
right.
mindset.
It's okay to do it as masturbation, but it's not okay to do it if you think that it's solving your problems.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's just that kind of awareness around like, am I getting this because I want this, or am I getting this because I need this?
Yeah,
like,
that's exactly right.
So
yeah, exactly right.
And you know, maybe like it's appropriate to have some hands-on therapy for a little while to help you get through that initial phase. But if there's no kind of plan for how you're then going to be able to self-manage, that's when I see it becoming really problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining us. Jerikichi, Bioxide, Quok, and I think that's it, who commented. If you did like what you heard, please do flip the screen if you're watching on a smart device and hit that little like button. If you're watching it on television, then go to your computer and hit that little like button. If you're watching it on a computer, don't be lazy, hit that little like button. And if you dislike anything that we do, double tap the dislike button. We are going to continue this discussion tomorrow.
Yeah, if people are interested, like I'd really like to, know if, this is all too much and and if anything's unclear, like if you want me to sort of simplify it more or go deeper into it, like it's super interesting.
That's exactly right. Look, I want to continue on this discussion because I'm learning from it as well, and I'm sure there are people out there that are.
Yeah.
So we're going to hit this up again tomorrow, and off the back of this, we're going to finally do our series on tendinitis. Tendinopathy, sorry. I get that wrong every time. Tendinopathy. And more precisely, and we're going to really, really focus on strategies to manage elbow or forearm tendinopathy, which I'm super excited about because I know a lot of you have been waiting for this.
So if you yourself or anyone who's kind of got these chronic issues with pain and, they're always coming up with reasons why they can't get into training related to pain, or if you know someone who's just, so reliant on pain medication, please share either the video or the podcast with them and just give them that, you're helping them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what we're trying to do here. We really want to help people.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Well, we're going to bring this in for a landing. Richie's got to go teach a class. We've got a big tribe of people out there. I think Rad might be helping out with it. And in the meantime, keep training no matter what. Motion is lotion. That's from Phil directly. And it's super important that you guys keep your bodies moving. Till tomorrow, we'll see you soon. Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that far.
It's the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.